From the distance came a clear call. "Stable bucku, sta-able buck." And then, "Where the hell is that goddamn nigger?" George stared at his solitaire lay, and then he flounced the cards together and turned around to Lenny. Lenny was lying down on the bunk watching him. "Look, Lenny. This here ain't no setup. I'm scared. You gonna have trouble with that curly guy. I seen that kind before. He was kinda feelin' you out. He figures he's got you scared and he's gonna take a sock at you the first chance he gets." Lenny's eyes were frightened. "I don't want no trouble," he said plaintively. "Don't let him sock me, George." George got up and went over to Lenny's bunk and sat down on it. "I hate that kinda bastard," he said. "I seen plenty of them. Like the old guy says, Curly don't take no chances. He always wins." He thought for a moment. "If he tangles with you, Lenny, we're gonna get the can. Don't make no mistake about that. He's the boss's son. Look, Lenny. You try to keep don't never speak to him. If he comes in here you move clear to the other side of the room. Will you do that, Lenny?" "I don't want no trouble," Lenny mourned. "I never done nothing to him." "Well, that won't do you no good if Curly wants to plug himself up for a fighter. Just don't have nothing to do with him. Will you? Remember?" "Sure, George. I ain't gonna say a word." The sound of the approaching grain teams was louder, thud of big hooves on hard ground, drag of brakes and the jingle of trace chains. Men were calling back and forth from the teams. George, sitting on the bunk beside Lenny, frowned as he thought Lenny asked timidly, "You ain't mad, George?" "I ain't mad at you. I'm mad at this here curly bastard. I hoped we was gonna get a little stake together, maybe $100. His tone grew decisive. "You keep away from Curly, Lenny." "Sure I will, George. I won't say a word. Don't let him pull you in, but if the son of a bitch socks you, let him have it." "Let him have what, George?" Never mind. I'll tell you when. I hate that kind of a guy. Look, Lenny, if you get in any kind of trouble, you remember what I told you to do?" Lenny raised up on his elbow. His face contorted with thought. Then his eyes moved sadly to George's face. "If I get in any trouble, you ain't gonna let me tend the rabbits." "That's not what I meant. You remember where we slept last night? Down by the river?" "Yeah. I remember." "Oh, sure I remember. I go there and hide in the brush. Hide till I come for you. Don't let nobody see you. Hide in the brush by the river." "Say that over." "Hide in the brush by the river, down in the brush by the river. If you get in trouble." "If I get in trouble." A brake screeched outside. A call came, "Stable buck." "Oh. Sta-able buck." George said, "Say it over to yourself, Lenny, so you won't forget it." Both men glanced up, for the rectangle of sunshine in the doorway was cut off. A girl was standing there looking in. She had full, rouged lips and wide-spaced eyes, heavily made up. Her fingernails were red. Her hair hung in little rolled clusters, like sausages. She wore a cotton house dress and red mules, on the insteps of which were little bouquets of red ostrich feathers. "I'm lookin' for Curly," she said. Her voice had a nasal, brittle quality. George looked away from her and then back. "He was in here a minute ago, but he went." "Oh." She put her hands behind her back and leaned against the door frame so that her body was thrown forward. "You're the new fellas that just come, ain't ya?" "Yeah." Lenny's eyes moved down over her body, and though she did not seem to be looking at Lenny, she bridled a little. She looked at her fingernails. Sometimes Curly's in here, she explained. George said brusquely, well, he ain't now. If he ain't, I guess I better look someplace else, she said playfully. Lenny watched her, fascinated. George said, if I see him, I'll pass the word you was looking for him. She smiled archly and twitched her body. Nobody can't blame a person for lookin', she said. There were footsteps behind her, going by. She turned her head. Hi, Slim, she said. Slim's voice came through the door. Hi, good-lookin', Dot. I'm tryin' to find Curly, Slim. Well, you ain't tryin' very hard. I seen him goin' in your house. She was suddenly apprehensive. Bye, boys, she called into the bunkhouse, and she hurried away. George looked around at Lenny. Jesus, what a tramp, he said. So that's what Curly picks for a wife. She's putty, said Lenny defensively. Yeah, and she's sure hidin' it. Curly got his work ahead of him. Bet she'd clear out for $20. Lenny still stared at the doorway where she had been. Gosh, she was putty. He smiled admiringly. George looked quickly down at him and then he took him by an ear and shook him. Listen to me, you crazy bastard, he said fiercely. Don't you even take a look at that bitch. I don't care what she says and what she does. I seen poison before, but I never seen no piece of jail bait worse than her. You leave her be. Lenny tried to disengage his ear. I never done nothing, George. No, you never. But when she was standin' in the doorway showin' her legs, you wasn't lookin' the other way, neither. I never meant no harm, George. Honest, I never. Well, you keep away from her, 'cause she's a rat trap if I ever seen one. You let Curly take the rap. He let himself in for it. Glove full of Vaseline, George said disgustedly. And I bet he's eatin' raw eggs and writin' to the patent medicine houses. Lenny cried out suddenly. I don't like this place, George. This ain't no good place. I wanna get outta here. We gotta keep it till we get a steak. We can't help it, Lenny. We'll get out just as soon as we can. I don't like it no better than you do. He went back to the table and set out a new solitaire hand. No, I don't like it, he said. For 2 bits I'd shove out of here. If we can get just a few dollars in the poke we'll shove off and go up the American River and pan gold. We can make maybe a couple of dollars a day there, and we might hit a pocket. Lenny leaned eagerly toward him. Lee's go, George. Lee's get outta here. It's mean here. We gotta stay, George said shortly. Shut up now. The guys'll be cumin' in. From the washroom nearby came the sound of running water and rattling basins. George studied the cards. Maybe we ought to wash up, he said. But we ain't done nothing to get dirty. A tall man stood in the doorway. He held a crushed Stetson hat under his arm while he combed his long, black, damp hair straight back. Like the others he wore blue jeans and a short denim jacket. He went back to the table and set out a new solitaire hand. No, I don't like it, he said. For 2 bits I'd shove out of here. If we can get just a few dollars in the poke we'll shove off and go up the American River and pan gold. We can make maybe a couple of dollars a day there, and we might hit a pocket. Lenny leaned eagerly toward him. Lee's go, George. Lee's get outta here. It's mean here. We gotta stay, George said shortly. Shut up now. The guys'll be cumin' in. From the washroom nearby came the sound of running water and rattling basins. George studied the cards. Maybe we ought to wash up, he said. But we ain't done nothing to get dirty. A tall man stood in the doorway. He held a crushed Stetson hat under his arm while he combed his long, black, damp hair straight back. Like the others, he wore blue jeans and a short denim jacket. He went back to the table and set out a new solitaire hand. "No, I don't like it," he said. "For 2 bits I'd shove out of here. If we can get just a few dollars in the poke, we'll shove off and go up the American River and pan gold. We can make maybe a couple of dollars a day there, and we might hit a pocket." Lenny leaned eagerly toward him. "Le's go, George. Le's get outta here. It's mean here." "We gotta stay," George said shortly. "Shut up now. The guys'll be cumin' in." From the washroom nearby came the sound of running water and rattling basins. George studied the cards. "Maybe we ought to wash up," he said. "But we ain't done nothing to get dirty." A tall man stood in the doorway. He held a crushed Stetson hat under his arm while he combed his long, black, damp hair straight back. Like the others, he wore blue jeans and a short denim jacket. Lenny, who had been following the conversation back and forth with his eyes, smiled complacency at the compliment. Slim looked approvingly at George for having given the compliment. He leaned over the table and snapped the corner of a loose card. "You guys travel around together?" His tone was friendly. It invited confidence without demanding it. "Sure," said George. "We kinda look after each other." He indicated Lenny with his thumb. "He ain't bright. Hell of a good worker, though. Hell of a nice fella, but he ain't bright. I've knew him for a long time." Slim looked through George and beyond him. "Ain't many guys travel around together," he mused. "I don't know why. Maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other. It's a lot nicer to go around with a guy you know," said George. A powerful, big-stomached man came into the bunkhouse. His head still dripped water from the scrubbing and dousing Lenny. "Hi, Slim," he said, and then stopped and stared at George. "And these guys just come," said Slim by way of introduction. "Glad to meet ya," the big man said. "My name's Carlson. I'm George Milton. This here's Lenny Small." "Glad to meet ya," Carlson said again. "He ain't very small." He chuckled softly at his joke. "Ain't small at all," he repeated. "Meant to ask you, Slim, how's your bitch? I seen she wasn't under your wagon this morning." "She slang her pups last night," said Slim. 9 of 'em. I drowned 4 of 'em right off. She couldn't feed that many. Got 5 left, huh?" "Yeah, 5. I kept the biggest. What kinda dogs you think they're gonna be?" "I dunno," said Slim. "Some kinda shepherds, I guess. That's the most kind I seen around here when she was in heat." Carlson went on, "Got 5 pups, huh? Gonna keep all of 'em?" "I dunno. Have to keep 'em a while so they can drink Lulu's milk." Carlson said thoughtfully, "Well, look here, Slim. I been thinkin'. That dog of Candy's is so goddamn old he can't hardly walk. Stinks like hell, too. Every time he comes into the bunkhouse I can smell him for 2-3 days. Why'n't you get Candy to shoot his old dog and give him one of the pups to raise up? I can smell that dog a mile away. Got no teeth, damn near blind, can't eat. Candy feeds him milk. He can't chew nothing else." George had been staring intently at Slim. Suddenly a triangle began to ring outside, slowly at first and then faster and faster until the beat of it disappeared into one ringing sound. It stopped as suddenly as it had started. "There she goes," said Carlson. Outside, there was a burst of voices as a group of men went by. Slim stood up slowly and with dignity. "You guys better come on while they's still something to eat. Won't be nothing left in a couple of minutes." Carlson stepped back to let Slim precede him, and then the two of them went out the door. Lenny was watching George excitedly. George rumpled his cards into a messy pile. "Yeah," George said, I heard him, Lenny. I'll ask him. A brown and white one, Lenny cried excitedly. Come on. Lee's get dinner. I don't know whether he got a brown and white one. Lenny didn't move from his bunk. You ask him right away, George, so he won't kill no more of 'em. Sure. Come on now, get up on your feet. Lenny rolled off his bunk and stood up, and the two of them started for the door. Just as they reached it, Curly bounced in. You seen a girl around here? He demanded angrily. George said coldly. 'Bout half an hour ago maybe. Well, what the hell was she doin'? George stood still, watching the angry little man. He said insultingly, she said she was lookin' for you. Curly seemed really to see George for the first time. His eyes flashed over George, took in his height, measured his reach, looked at his trim middle. Well, which way'd she go? He demanded at last. I dunno, said George. I didn't watch her go. Curly scowled at him, and turning, hurried out the door. George said, You know, Lenny, I'm scared I'm gonna tangle with that bastard myself. I hate his guts. Jesus Christ. Come on. They won't be a damn thing left to eat. They went out the door. The sunshine lay in a thin line under the window. From a distance there could be heard a rattle of dishes. After a moment the ancient dog walked lamely in through the open door. He gazed about with mild, half-blind eyes. He sniffed, and then lay down and put his head between his paws. Curly popped into the doorway again and stood looking into the room. The dog raised his head, but when Curly jerked out, the grizzled head sank to the floor again.